We are continuing along here on Three Dog Thursday. It is the YouTube Roundtable. Great to be with you and great to be with two of my colleagues. You talk about legends in two different markets. This is no exaggeration for these guys. Ronnie Night Train Lane, who has been a 40-plus year radio legend in the Tampa Bay area, will now work his second Super Bowl with the Buccaneers. Go Bucs. He was there 18 years ago for the win in San Diego, working the sideline. He's now on the pre- and post-game coverage on Buccaneers radio. Night Train Lane, my Tampa Bay Buccaneer brother from another mother, as I always like to say on this show. Great to have you. Thank you for popping on the YouTube Roundtable, sir.
Good to be here, man, and it's a great time to be a sports fan, I would imagine, in the Tampa Bay area. Look at what has happened. The Lightning have secured the Stanley Cup. The Raves, within 2 games of a World Series win. And now the Bucs. The Bucs are in the Super Bowl in Tampa. Crazy.
Yeah, it is crazy times. I got another legend, a Chicago sports radio reporting legend and sports radio legend. George Ofman is with me. Oh, by the way, let us not forget 35th anniversary of those 1985 Chicago Bears. So it's good timing to have George here on the program, including he's got a launch of a new podcast we're going to talk to you about. I bow to radio greatness, and George Ofman comes on board on the YouTube Roundtable on Three Dog Thursday. My friend, how are you?
I'm great, and after hearing, hearing Ronnie talk about the Buccaneers, the Rays, and the Lightning, and what's happening in Chicago, I feel like I should walk out. things haven't been very good in Chicago lately.
Yeah, it has been a little dry. But we should say, though, you've had it great for a while with the Bulls winning a bunch, the Blackhawks winning a bunch. Didn't the Cubs, Ronnie's a Cardinal guy. I didn't tell you this, George, before I hit the record button. Ronnie's a Cardinal guy. He didn't want to hear this. But the Cubs won the World Series, too, while we're at it. And the White Sox have a World Series in the 2000s. It's not exactly been dry in Chicago, not dry like it has been some other places. Come on, George.
No, it picked up. Yes, it did pick up in the 90s after the Bears won a Super Bowl. So then it picked up with the Bulls winning 6, the Blackhawks winning 3, and the White Sox finally breaking through after 88 years, and the Cubs winning after 108 years. But you know what goes up must come down.
Yes, well, it seemingly has been, and for the Bucs, what has been down has now come up some with this. And to that end, why don't we go ahead and take a look at exactly what as they watch us here on the YouTube Roundtable, what we're talking about in Tampa Bay, what happened at Lambeau Field as we see it on the screen last weekend. Ronnie, we've had a few days to digest this. 3 consecutive playoff wins on the road. Surreal is the word I keep coming back to. Maybe we got to find another word. Bizarre, whatever you want to call it. To see Tom Brady, who we watched for 20 years, win these games in New England, now in Buccaneer pewter and red, winning in Green Bay. What are your thoughts a few days later here, now that we're watching this and this has really happened and they're in the Super Bowl?
It's truly remarkable that Brady is playing at the level that he is at the age of 43. That just tells you that he has really taken good care of himself. He's a very disciplined individual. And for him to come in here and will this team, I mean, he always tells you it's not just me, and he's right about that. He is certainly correct about that, because if you look at the championship game in Chicago, and you were there, I mean, you were covering it too, TJ Rives. He was excellent in the first half, not so much in the second half with 3 interceptions, very un-Brady-like. But what happened? For the most part, the Buccaneers defense rose to the occasion and bailed him out against the great Aaron Rodgers and the Packers at historic Lambeau Field.
Yes, they did. Brady was great in the first half, not so great in the second half, but you're right. The defense did what it had to do. Now, interestingly, George is in Chicago. I don't know the answer to this. I think I know. Bears fans, Chicago sports fans, so anti-Green Bay, so anti-Rodgers that you were actually kind of bandwagoning as a fan base or as an area onto the Bucs to keep the Packers out? What about it?
Well, but there are fans who are anti-Brady because of the New England Patriots and the chicanery that they went through. But I would say that the balance of justice was much more that they don't want to see Rodgers in the Super Bowl. That said, though, there's a great deal of respect for him as well because of what he has done for Green Bay and the fact that the Bears haven't had a reasonably good quarterback now in about 100 years. So, but the fact that Brady is there, there are probably fans that just don't want to see Brady there because he's been there so often. I was thinking about this today, what an anomaly Tom Brady is at age 43. There are very few athletes that defy Father Time. LeBron James is one of them, still at the top of his game at age 37. What has he been to? 10 straight finals? I'm thinking in terms of a guy like Gordie Howe. Chris Chelios was a top-notch defenseman in his 40s. Nelson Cruz is looking for a job. He's the best DH, and he's 40. There are just some
Nolan
guys.
Ryan, can I add Nolan
Nolan
Ryan was still
Ryan,
blowing him
yeah.
away in his 40s, but it's rare, to your point.
It is rare, and I don't know what Tom Brady's future is going to be like. At one point, something in his brain is going to click, saying, "You know what? I'm one hit away from you know what." But it wouldn't surprise me. He comes back next year, and the Bucs are favored to win. It's Brady.
Interesting, Ronnie Lane. Pardon me, Ronnie. On your radio program, the Ronnie and T. Crash Show, midweek, Bruce Arians was on board. You put the question to the Buccaneers coach: would you walk off? Essentially, I'm paraphrasing. If they win, what did he say to you? And how do you think that relates to Brady? Follow up on what Arians answered to you guys on local Tampa Bay radio Wednesday.
Yeah, he basically said, and I'll have to paraphrase it, but no, let's do two. Let's have two. I'm coming back, basically, is what he said. He's not going anywhere. And Brady has signed for 2 years, and some are speculating now, things go well, he could come back a third year. But, eventually Father Time has got to catch up with this cat. But we're enjoying this run right now. It's magical. It's historic. And I can't wait for the Super Bowl. You've got the Tom Brady in waiting in Patrick Mahomes. And, of course, we have the Tom Brady playing for the Bucs. I mean, this should be a splendid game, man. I think it could end up a shootout.
Yeah, man, we're looking forward to that coming in Tampa Bay. More on that in a second. I want to go back to George again about the Chicago area, the Chicago fans. There it is, George Ofman. 35 years ago, earlier this week, the Bears and the Fridge victorious in the Superdome over the New England Patriots. Speaking of Tom Brady, again, take us back to that. I know the Bears have been in the Super Bowl since with Lovie Smith in the 2000s, but take us back to that time and what that was like covering that team and them winning it. Give us some insight, George Ofman.
Well, if I'm not mistaken, the Fridge is still the only appliance to score a touchdown in Super Bowl history. It was really a magical time. If not for losing in Miami, the Bears would have been an undefeated team. And there are those of us who still believe that they are arguably the best team in NFL history. They didn't go undefeated, but they were 15-1 and steamrolled their way into the playoffs, through the playoffs. I mean, they vanquished the New York Giants. They vanquished the Los Angeles Rams. It was just easy. And people fell in love with the team because of the massive amount of personalities they had, from Otis Wilson to Jim McMahon, Willie Gault. They just had a ton of remarkable, Steve McMichael. But that's fading now. I think fans have gotten so fed up with what's happening with Bears management now. They're 35 years later. It's like, okay, that's great. They cashed in. Can you guys give us another Super Bowl champion? All I know is that I texted a friend of mine last night who lives down in South Florida and showed him a picture of a party that we had. He was at my house that night 35 years ago. And it was, by the way, 10 below zero.
They are trying to think warm thoughts in Chicago. George is telling us you got 5 inches of snow on the ground, but show the YouTube roundtable audience on Three Dog Thursday. What do you have? You're channeling your South Florida on your shirt. You're channeling warm thoughts because he's channeling Key West. Very nice, George. While he has 4 inches of snow or 5 in Chicago. That's not bad. Again, we kick it around with George Ofman. Follow him on Twitter, George OF, 1F, Ofman, OFMAN. George has got a great new storytelling podcast I'm going to promote here at the end of this roundtable in a few moments. Ronnie Lane is also here. Ronnie NTL on Twitter. Ronnie is on with Tom Krasnicki. Ronnie and T. Kras do the morning show on WDAE, the sports radio station here in Tampa Bay. Ronnie also on the pre and post game show coverage of Buccaneers radio. Ronnie has been associated with the Buccaneer broadcast on and off for about 30 years. Hello. Perfect segue, Night Train Lane. to 18 years ago this week. Here it is. I'm showing it on screen as we speak. Tampa Bay Buccaneers in San Diego beating the Oakland Raiders. Ronnie, you were on the call with Gene Deckerhoff, Scott Brantley in the booth. You were on the sideline for this game. 18 years later, 5 Rich Gannon interceptions by the Bucs. Mike Allstott a touchdown. Keenan McCardell caught 2 touchdowns. The Buccaneers end up winning this game. Enough of me. You were there on the call. What was that like? What do you remember fondly the most?
Well, you talk about surreal with Brady being the Bucs quarterback. That was surreal because it was the Bucs' first ever appearance in the Super Bowl, obviously. And the thing was, you were here. You remember the Bucs traded for John Gruden. Who had ever heard of somebody trading for a coach? But they traded for John Gruden that year. And all he did was revamp the offense. He left the defense completely alone. He told Monty Kiffin, who was with Tony Dungy's staff, I want all of your coaches. I want you. I want all of your defensive schemes. And he's going to work on the offense. And boy, did he ever. And if you'll recall, TJ Reeves, Brad Johnson was the quarterback. He was nothing super spectacular, but he took care of the football. He threw it away when he didn't have anything. He knew when the journey was over, as our friend Dave Moore likes to say. And he kept the Bucs in games, and they finally got that offense cranking towards the end of the season with Keyshawn Johnson and company, and really rolled through the playoffs.
And
then
hand the ball
through.
to that guy, Mike Allstott, we're watching on the YouTube roundtable, hammers through for a touchdown. They did some of that. They threw it enough. Look at John Gruden against his old team. I mean, Hollywood, this is a Hollywood type thing against his old team. I still at times think about this, Ronnie, and say, were we really there? Did that really happen? Particularly the way that it happened against the Oakland Raiders, his old team. It did happen. It's incredible. 18 years ago.
And if you'll recall, the people in San Diego loved us. One, we were an NFC team that was going to take on their dreaded, hated Oakland Raiders. I mean, they hated the Raiders in San Diego. Everybody became a Bucs fan. So that was pretty cool. And then the fact that, San Diego is such a beautiful place. And this was right after 9/11, TJ. And I didn't know it at the time that we left Tampa. We left Tampa on the same day that we got back from Philadelphia. They had moved the game up to where it was just 1 week between the Super Bowl and the championship games. And we landed in Tampa at about 3:30 or 4 o'clock in the morning, had a big party there, big celebration. And then we were back at the stadium to leave for San Diego at 11 a.m. So basically go home, do some laundry, and come back and head to San Diego. And we didn't know when we got on the plane, we were all so tired that the coaching staff did not get on the plane. So we were stunned when we got there, and the media was that we were at San Diego Naval Station for one. We didn't know we were flying into that. That was for security purposes, but it was crazy, man. And it was a good time, though. That week flew by so quickly.
Yeah, that was the last time there was only 1 week between the championship games and the Super Bowl for both the Raiders and the Buccaneers, as you hear the voice of Ronnie Lane. Also, George Ofman is here. It's the 3 Dog Thursday podcast. Again, I always say this. If you're only hearing us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, come find us on YouTube on 3 Dog Thursday. Again, you'll see the moving pictures, see what we look like, etc. Not surprising. This is like 4th week in a row. I'm rocking the Buccaneer stuff, 98 Rock, the home of the Buccaneers, and our radio network. I've got the Super Bowl hat, Train and George, on the YouTube roundtable. They can come see it. There's the Super Bowl champions hat for the Bucs right behind me here in the shot. They can find that. And again, this is going to be wild next week to have the game here. Ronnie, one more time. You've been a resident here 5 decades now. I'm not making you out to be ancient, but we've had Super Bowls before, but this is going to be something special to have the hometown team in the Super Bowl. Ronnie, give me a little more.
No, it really is. The last Super Bowl I attended here, and to show my age a little bit more here, was 18 years ago. Not 18 years ago, 30 years ago on Wednesday, when the Bucs, not the Bucs, but the Buffalo Bills and the New York Football Giants were in the 25th anniversary Super Bowl. And that was incredible. What you remember most from that is the security leading up to the game and getting into the stadium. It took me about 2.5 hours, and I'm an accredited member of the media to get into, at that time it was Tampa Stadium. We called it the Big Sombrero. But, once you got in there, the security was so, it was like a war zone almost, just to be blunt about it. There
Because
was a Black Hawk
in that time frame for
helicopter.
the audience, and we have a lot of younger guys that listen and gals that
Right.
listen, that was the first Iraq Desert Storm that
The
had just
first
gotten
war.
underway like the week before or 2 weeks before, and there were all kinds of
1 week
concerns.
before. Right.
And
Remember,
so
they almost canceled the game. The NFL was thinking about canceling the game.
And so
But
that
they
was the
decided-
Giants and the Bills and Whitney Houston with the epic national anthem, the late Whitney Houston, and then Scott
never
Norwood
forget it.
wide to the right for the Bills, who've never lived that down.
Scott Norwood. And by the
for
way,
sure.
I was recently married 2 years now to a young lady from Buffalo, so she has not forgotten that at
And
all.
she was dying hard, I'm sure, last weekend trying to get the Bills to the Super Bowl with the Buccaneers. That's for sure.
Yeah,
No
she was a
doubt.
mess Sunday night, but God bless her, love her, and she'll be fine. She was
Yes.
hoping her Bills would be here.
Yeah, but as it turns out, it's the Bucs and the Chiefs. Again, more on that next week. All right, George Ofman, back to you. I love me some new podcast that you have. It is called Tell Me a Story That I Don't Know. We're showing it on the screen right now to the YouTube audience. This is where you can find it on Apple Podcasts. It's on all the major podcast outlets. It's on the TuneIn radio app for free as well. Your debut episode this week, Chicago's Mike Wilbon. This is a storytelling podcast with a Chicago theme. George, tell me more about Tell Me a Story I Don't Know, why you wanted to do it, and the guests that are coming on, if you would.
Well, why I wanted to do it is because I had lost my job at WBBM Radio. I was the guy that was cut back in July. I'd been there for 10 years. And so it didn't take me long. It was a couple of weeks. I came up with an idea. The idea was to do an interview with sports personalities with connections to Chicago. And I started to put together a list. And the list was local and national. And you can see, besides Michael Wilbon, we have Bob Costas, Mike Greenberg, Sarah Kustok, and there are a whole bunch more, Marv Albert, and many more that I'll be interviewing for our second season. Along with locals, Eddie Olczyk is kind of that cross. He's national and local. Steve Stone is the longtime baseball analyst here for the Cubs and now for the White Sox. And this was all about stories of connections to Chicago, but stories of their history. And I can tell you, once you let the water, turn on the faucet, the water just flows and people talk and talk and talk. And it's great because your memory is flooded with things that you did that were part of your career. And in the case of Michael Wilbon, he was such a natural because, not only has he come to great fame at the Washington Post and, of course, pardon the interruption now for the last 20 plus years, but he's a South Side native of Chicago. He still has a residence here. He still does a lot of critiquing of the Bears. Boy, he does a ton of that on his Twitter account. So he still bleeds Chicago sports. Mike Greenberg began his professional career in Chicago. Andrew Siciliano began his professional career in Chicago, and they all have great stories to tell. So this is weekly, and next week we'll go with Eddie Olczyk, and I think the following week with Bob Costas, and he's quite remarkable as well because his connections to Chicago are, and I'll just give you one example, the very first Super Bowl he hosted was Super Bowl 20, the Bears and the New England Patriots 35 years ago.
How about that from Bob Costas? And Costas actually, as you mentioned, I think you said this, worked Chicago Bulls games on TV long before the NBC gigs that he got in the 80s. For that, Mike Greenberg got his start before being on ESPN, obviously in Chicago. I don't know that there's a better analyst in any sport, no disrespect to all of them, than Eddie Olczyk on the hockey. You learn something every time, the energy, the enthusiasm. Great. And so you'll hear these people telling story. Olczyk tells a phenomenal story, Ronnie, and for the audience on Three Dog Thursday, about learning that he was being traded while he's in the delivery room with his wife giving birth. How did I do on the tees, George Ofman, for that? Tell me a story I don't know coming subsequently. How'd I do?
Great. It is a great story, and he tells it in length, and he tells it with great humor, and he remembers every aspect about it, and he's so enthusiastic about it. That story alone is worth listening to it. He's told it several times, maybe many times before, but it is a great story. But he also talks about a dream sequence right off the bat. So they're all very interesting in that they have stories that you haven't heard. Some you might, but many that you've never heard before, and it's really introspective and it's quite interesting.
Again, if you're only hearing us, Tell Me a Story I Don't Know is available wherever you get podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts. And again, you can find it. I'm going to go ahead and plug for both of these guys here one more time. You can find them through social media and the links to all of their stuff. Find George Ofman right here at OFMAN, George Ofman, all one thing on Twitter. Find him there. Find
There
him
he
on
is.
Facebook. There's that
That's my
mug.
favorite guy, Ozzie Guillen, let me tell you.
Ozzy is giving you a
Yes.
little head rub there. We
More than
all
that.
have the lack of follicles on top at this point. So anyway, George Ofman on Twitter and on Facebook. And again, I'll plug one more time. There it is. Tell Me a Story I Don't Know. If you're seeing us on the YouTube Roundtable, is the podcast. Great stuff there. Love this man, Ronnie Lane. Ronnie NTL for Night Train Lane. Ronnie NTL on Twitter right there. Find him also with Tom Krasnicki on the morning show, weekday mornings. But I love Ronnie best of all being with him every weekend in the fall for Tampa Bay Buccaneers football, pre and post game host. Train, you are the answer to the trivia question with Gene Deckerhoff. You're the two guys that have worked the two Bucs Super Bowls on Buccaneer Radio when this happens a week and a half from now. My brother, I love it.
Yeah. Hey, look, Gene's a Hall of Famer. Love him, and we've had some great times, and we have great stories. And sometimes Gene gets into those on the broadcast, and I'm sure you guys are looking at each other going, what in the hell? But yeah, good times, man.
Yeah, Gene and Ronnie go way back. We all go back way together. And again, this man's a legend in Tampa Bay. George Ofman, a legend in Chicago. Guys, we run out of time here. I have told all the stories, and they have too, that they can tell, George. How'd I do on that? Now you got to listen to George's podcast to find a story we don't know. Ronnie went and got the football. Hold the football up for the YouTube audience one more time. Turn that thing around. There is the Super Bowl 37 football that he has right there that the Bucs celebrated the anniversary of this week. Let's hope there's another one coming for Buccaneers and Chiefs. Ronnie Lane, George Ofman, thank you for hanging out on the Three Dog Thursday podcast and the YouTube Roundtable, gentlemen. I appreciate having you. Good luck with all of your stuff. Ronnie, I look forward to talking to you on Buccaneers Radio.
Yes, sir. Super Sunday.
My pleasure, TJ.